Hi, we will now start with the first panel of the 5th Public Sector Transformation Conference. So we have already heard from our keynote speakers what is the overall vision for the transformation of public sector. And now this first panel today really aims at looking at details of how the European Cloud Federation will work in practice and how the Gaia-X Foundation will really shape up. And the foundation, as you know, will be formally launched mid-November. So I would like to introduce our panel, and we're really very privileged today to have all the key decision makers that are really shaping these entities together with us. First of all, I'd like to introduce Professor Dr. Boris Otto, Executive Director of the Fraunhofer Institute, and Dr. Otto obviously has a critical role in the Gaia-X Foundation. You are in fact in the interim management team, in the board of directors, and interim CTO of the foundation. So thank you so much for joining us. We will then have Mario Campolargo, that many of you know, Acting Director General of DigiDigit. So Mario, really great to have you today with us. Obviously really curious to hear how the Commission as a cloud user is really embracing on this federation journey. We will then move on to Pierre Chastanet, Head of Unit of the Cloud and Software Unit in DG Connect. So really leading at shaping the work on cloud in Europe today. So welcome, Pierre. And then we will move on to industry. So we will first have Cedric from Deputy CEO and Chief Marketing Officer at Orange Cloud Business. So great to have you with us today. Welcome. And last but not least, we'll hear from Ralph Schirmeisen, Chief Technologist for Public Sector at HPE. So since we already set the scene, I think, abundantly in the first session, I'll give you immediately the floor, Professor Otto, to hear how the foundation is shaping up, who's at the table, how can stakeholders, we have over 200 people today already watching live, so how can people join and how can public sector benefit? Dr. Otto, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Irena, for the nice introduction and also the opportunity to share a couple of thoughts with you with regard to digital infrastructures for the public domain, but also for industrial domains and the role that Gaia-X is playing in that endeavor. So if we could move to the next slide, please. I'd like to start briefly with, let's say, a couple of well-known facts. Of course, both on a European level, but also on member states level, there is a call for the creation of data spaces in various domains. That is cited quite often, and is also the right way to go in order to make sure that in Europe the data treasure that we have can be leveraged, but only according to our own rules. So, but then the question arises, okay, if we have a call for data spaces, as I said, the question arises, well, what is actually a data space and how can I get one, right? And that brings us to the next slide, please, where I brought with me a couple of fundamental design principles that holds true for data spaces in general. So data spaces are a data integration concept, and there are a couple of, as I said, general design principles that have been basically defined like 10, 15 years ago, which I will briefly walk through. So first, there is no physical data integration needed. So you basically, the data can be left where it is, so at the data provider side, right? And that is also, let's say, pretty much in line with a call for rather federated infrastructures and architectures rather than pooling data on a physical level, right? So also, we do not require common schemas. So we do not want to force everybody into the same database schema and stick to the same syntactical format, right? So integration, therefore, basically will be achieved on a semantic level, and that is also pretty much in line with what we have been discussing over the last years. Also, data networking is envisaged, so we foresee a little bit redundancy. So basically, data representing the same real-world objects can be stored on the different member sites, and nobody is really forced to have, let's say, one single source of truth. And of course, data spaces can overlap. So one data space can be formed on a, let's say, very limited basis and can then be part of a larger data space. From the International Data Spaces initiative, we added two further design principles, which are data sovereignty and traceability. So I want to know what happens with my data after I shared it, and also, of course, trust among the partners. That brings me to the next slide, please, because it's always good to look into that using an example. And this is taken from the mobility domain. And it's useful in our point of view to think in, let's say, these architectural layers. So on the top level, that is what we want to achieve together. We want to foster the creation of digital and smart services that make use of the data, but of course, at the same time, respect the interests of the data provider and respect the interest and trust of the data consumer. So this is what we usually refer to a data ecosystem. And that is something which is basically where business models emerge on an individual basis, where basically no standard organization or public agency should interfere. But then in the middle layer, what we need in order to make these end-to-end digital services happen is a shared digital twin, as we call it, or a data space. Sometimes in other domains, this is referred to as the digital thread. So we need to be able to make data accessible, respecting the usage constraints of the data providers, of course. And that is what we have to take care of. And that is also what Pierre O'Donoghue basically referred to when he said, well, it's about the data, right? He added another word, which I would leave out right now. So, and on the lower hand, you, of course, have to respond to the question, well, you know, the data is not just there. It needs to be exchanged through a software infrastructure. And that basically brings us to the second part of these things that are important in terms of digital sovereignty. So where is actually the data stored? So where does it have its home? And on which infrastructure services does the software run that is used in order to share the data? And so we need to think these things together, but basically always keep in mind that there are different architectural levels to discuss. So next slide, please. As you can see, also by the color code here, Gaia-X is aiming at bringing these two architectural layers together. So in blue, the data service layer, Gaia-X is envisaging a data ecosystem, but also in red, the infrastructure ecosystem. And of course, as mentioned in the very early beginning of my presentation, Gaia-X is acknowledging the fact that we will not have, let's say, a central data store, but rather we leave, let's say, data where it is and exchange, share it when needed. So it's a federated, decentralized approach. So if you imagine a federated architecture, of course, there need to be some services, let's call it in the middle, in order to make sure that the distributed participants in this network are able to find each other and are able to exchange data in an interoperable fashion. And this is where we need the so-called federated services for, which you can see here depicted in green. I don't want to go in all the details. You will be able to get the presentation, of course, afterwards. But these fundamental services, for example, take care of identity management. Can I really trust the party that is requesting my data? It is something that deals with the fact that, let's say, usage constraints are attached to the data once it's shared, and so on and so forth. Please move to the next slide, please. What is also important to understand is that Gaia-X is not, let's say, about starting from scratch again, right? Because there are many things out there, many investments that have already been made, and that was also something that has been mentioned by the previous speakers in the member states in additional initiatives. For example, the IDS initiative, huge investments have been made that can be leveraged and scaled up through Gaia. So Gaia-X is aiming at an architecture of standards which makes use of the different puzzle pieces that fit into the big picture. And this view graph should show you a little bit, let's say, that the IDS architecture that some of you might know and the Gaia-X architecture approach fits nicely together. And that is something that we need to work together on in order to integrate it so that it's really functional and effective in the end. So if you could move to the next slide, please. That basically brings me to the point that has also been mentioned by Irena. We need, in order to organize and coordinate the work, and let me stress that also, I mean, what we have in here up front, or the task at hand, is a great opportunity. We define the trust infrastructure by ourselves. So it's from us as the community, for the community. And that is really, really an important and powerful element in the entire initiative. And of course, it is necessary, in order to organize the work and coordinate ourselves, that we create a home for this community and this initiative. And this is what the Gaia-X Association is about. As Irena mentioned, it's currently under incorporation under Belgian law. But let me stress or walk you a little bit through the core deliverables that the association will take care of. Of course, there will be other, let's say, activities and endeavors going on that will adopt Gaia. But let me outline a little bit what the focus is of the association. And it's very lean and therefore manageable, and also, let's say, straightforward. So first, there will be a standard document. So there will be a document, a PDF document, which has written on its title page, Gaia-X architecture, right? Because we need to specify how Gaia-X works and what it's all about. And along with that come test criteria in order to basically tell, okay, this service is adhering to the Gaia-X architecture, and this doesn't, right? So this needs to be tested. Second, we need to make sure that these fundamental services, the federated services that I just showed 2 slides before, that they are there, right? So we need to issue digital tokens or certificates, and we also need to make sure that the federated service catalog is available. Third thing, we would like to use the power of open source, because it's a trust anchor in itself, and it allows us to use the power of the many. And this is, let's say, our unfair advantage, if you may. And of course, we want to facilitate data spaces. Gaia-X will not run a data space, but will help that data spaces emerge. Perhaps next slide, please. So looking into, let's say, success factors that we can observe or have been observing over the past months and years when it comes to, okay, I want to build a data space. So what we see very often is that there is a combined funding model, and that is something that has been addressed also in the previous session as well. Because in the end, you know, it's an infrastructure, and you can refer to this notion as with other infrastructures as well, like the motorway or the railway system, and usually they need to be there in order for individual business models to emerge on that. And the question then also comes to the point, okay, how do we finance and fund infrastructures in general? So there we will end up with combined models. We also need to think about incentive systems, because the data provider usually say, well, okay, it's nice, it's a new distribution or sales channel for my data, but I'm not the one who's driving that. While on the other side, you know, according to the logic of two-sided markets, we have, let's say, the data consumers that say, okay, sounds good, I'd like to use this, but show me what kind of data offerings you have through your infrastructure. And we need to create critical mass. And we also need to make sure that, let's say, incentive systems are in place for people to share data, but also to trust in the architecture. And then there are a multitude of adoption success factors I brought forward with me, like perhaps we need cooperative operation models. This also is different from, let's say, the consumer platform industry, where we have usually one keystone player who drives the entire thing and also basically, well, tells what's going on. And I feel that in Europe, we will end up with a number of, let's say, these cooperative consortia-like operating models. Yes, and standards, of course, need to be created. I think, particularly what Pierre also said earlier on, I think we should think that basically also in the public domain, we really adopt these kind of standards, so make it mandatory in public tenders, for example, in order to create this critical mass. And with that, I'd like to close my little keynote presentation, and I'm looking forward for the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and that was really fascinating. A lot of very interesting content shared there. We'll come there to questions later on, but I think there are a few concepts that are really interesting, and you phrased them very nicely. So that Gaia-X, so the design will be done by the community for the community, yes, and really Gaia-X as the home for this community. and obviously also highlighted the importance of open source, the power of many, and how the critical mass will be fundamental for the success of this federated model. And we did already touch a little bit upon that, but we'll rediscuss why should stakeholders actually join this exercise, and we'll again see the benefits. Some of them have been already addressed, and others will be actually addressed by the speakers coming now. Maybe what I'm going to do, because I realize that we are just on time and we have lots of questions coming in, I'll just give the floor to all the speakers. So I have to make a trade-off between sharing this excellent content you guys are providing and asking questions. So I will apologize already if we won't be able to answer really all of them. So I would actually then transition to Mario Campolargo to provide the vision of Commission as a user. So we heard, Mario, that obviously Commissioner Hahn was saying that the institutions will be really the front runner on this, so no pressure, Mario. And so we want really to hear from you. How do you envisage your cloud journey? Where are you in your cloud journey? And what are the next milestones? The floor is yours. Thank you.
Sorry, is this okay now? Apologies.
Perfect.
Thanks, Irena, for the introduction. Thanks for the opportunity to be with you. And as you just said, I'll try to reflect here one of the sides of the question, that is the consumption side. The European Commission, like lots of other public administrations, are eager to use cloud. And let me say that Commissioner Hahn already referred in the morning that we adopted 2 years ago what we call the European Commission Digital Strategy, where data is at the core. Actually, we want to transform the Digital Commission in a data-driven institution, a digitally powered institution, and with that being open for collaborations with all the Europeans, in particular with the providers of cloud, as we are discussing here today. Data is at the center, and although maybe the public sector has been somehow hesitant, I think that the Commissioner Hahn confirmed our intention to work together. The whole Commission, being it through the more general policies, being it as a consumer of solutions that are in the market, we are all working together to change this. Data is for us a fundamental challenge. It's a big challenge, but it's also a big opportunity. And I don't want to repeat some of the things that my previous colleagues from the Commission repeated, and here or in other forum. I mean, the open data directives for us very important as a public administration, looking into the once only principle. For example, in initiatives like the single digital gateway that will allow Europeans, citizens or businesses wherever they are, to access the right information at the right moment and be able to digitally engage through the public administration of the place where they are, in line with all the other public administrations. And what Dr. Otto referred so much, the public spaces, that the data spaces that are so important for all of us. I want here to refer one word that Dr. Otto mentioned. We have data treasures in Europe, and I think that the public sector actually hold a lot of this data that is so important for everybody. And as we want to say, trust is for us fundamental. Government is actually a natural trust actor, and we want to continue being that in the digital world. Working with a lot of administrations means also that if we want to be loyal to the once only principle, we have to ensure that there is interoperability framework that brings together all the administrations, and this interoperability is very much in line with the general principles that Dr. Otto mentioned that are guiding the particular case of the Gaia-X development. And those principles have to do with the aspects of the integration of data, integration at semantic level rather than at IT level, the data networking, the aspects of nesting, etc. And I want to rely here the importance of the interoperability framework that Europe has been pursuing, and that is always in change, and will be certainly reinforced in the years to come, because it's much beyond the technical details. I think that they are always very important, but it's much beyond it. What is important is the semantic, the legal, and organizational. We need to know that we are talking to the right organization that has the capacity to rely some information to myself. We have to know the mandates of those organizations, and we have to understand the data that is shared, thus agreeing on describing the data with commonly agreed, in a commonly agreed fashion. And cloud is very important for us. First, to make sure that we can interoperate between public administrations, common data spaces being one particular example. There are multiple examples, and also it's a challenge for us, because we need to go from the traditional way of providing services, typically under our data centers, to extend it to the cloud. And the Commission started this process some time ago. Back in 2014, we started with the first experiments, and in our digital strategy is very clear that our infrastructure should be a hybrid cloud infrastructure, using cloud on premise, using public cloud provided by the market operators. And here comes the very important aspect. For us, it's very important that we have solutions in the market that are interoperable, and that are provided by multiple actors, and that are in line with the European values. This is very fundamental for us. And in this context, if we have this, if we achieve that, and I think that Gaia-X is polarizing a lot of those aspects, both from the digital sovereignty point of view, also from the trust point of view, also from the open source trust point of view, by bringing the power of many, as you just said, Irene, and Dr. Otto also referred. This is going in the side where we, public administration, will be very interested. So here, I would like also to challenge all of us to try to understand what are the needs of the public administrations, to make sure that we are not just consumers of solutions that will emerge in the market, but that we can collaborate, that we can actually create a critical mass and draw the attention from the providers of the solutions to the needs of the public administrations. And if we are able to do that, we then engage with an ecosystem of innovation. That is the only way for public administrations to be able to address the needs of business and citizens in the 21st century. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you so much, Mario. And as you say, so you made a decision for a hybrid and multi-vendor type of approach. And I think that this question of the ability of European cloud consumers to really have a choice in the market, it's really critical. And so we do understand that this whole exercise on the federation aims also at boosting and variety in the cloud provision in the region. The other very important point, in my view, if I may, I think really starting from the needs of the public administration. And here, and this is also why we are actually organizing this get-together every year, to really try to give a small contribution to this debate. And typically we would meet, as you know, in person in Brussels and have some nice networking. And unfortunately, we have to do it live and very compacted now. So, but thank you so much for your remarks, and we'll come back to some of these points at the end of the panel. I would like now to introduce Pierre Chastanet. So really looking after cloud, obviously, and software in DG Connect. And obviously, Pierre, we have numerous initiatives that have been tackled. And it would be interesting to hear from you, what are maybe some pilots that you're already working on with the member states, and what is the thinking also around financing? Because obviously the vision is ambitious, and we have to have the means to get there. So Pierre, the floor is yours.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Can you hear me properly? I will take this as a yes. Indeed, so we see that cloud computing is really a critical digital technology, which is a prerequisite for a successful digital transformation of the public sector, and that's why we have been investing quite early in a number of pilots with the member states to see how cloud could be used for the purpose of modernizing the public sector in Europe. The public sector is certainly one of the most data-intensive sector within Europe, and we see that the digital asset of the public sector continue to develop at a quite unprecedented pace. So we wanted really to test how it can work among different member states to actually share infrastructure and develop common services, which is absolutely not trivial because for many member states, keeping their data on their territory is part of the national sovereignty aspect, sometimes touching upon national security issues. So building on the work that we have done on free flow of data in Europe, trying to break the barriers that were existing in the EU and that were still preventing free flow of data, non-personal data in particular. We saw that there was an opportunity for member states to reduce their cost by starting sharing some of their infrastructure and their data services. So just to give a couple concrete examples, so using Horizon 2020 funds, we have been piloting, for instance, the sharing of cloud workload among different member states by interconnecting their data centers and then testing the possibility to have a certain processing of sensitive data of one member state done in a different member state. So on the technological point of view, for many of you in the audience, this will seem pretty trivial. But if you think about it on a political point of view, this is really something really major. This is where we are somewhat walking the talk, where the free flow of data becomes a reality. Of course, to make this happen, you need a lot of reassurance. So for that purpose, we tested blockchain technologies as a mean to have reassurance that data, when they are processed in a different member state, are not going to be altered. And we could test this successfully for taxation databases and for criminal records. So you see pretty sensitive data. What we see is that the member states are really embracing this challenge. We see more and more member states developing national cloud strategies, and depending on the country, they will address both the national need of their own public administration, and in a number of occasions, they will also see the opportunity of using and promoting cloud in their national industry as a means to drive competitiveness. So this is very much in line with the policies we're trying to stimulate ourselves, try to have cloud-first policies across the board, starting with public administration, of course, but also broadening it across the European economy. We fully do realize that this is going to require significant investment, and this was really at the heart of the recent joint declaration that the member states have been signing on the 15th of October, and where all the member states, so really all member states have signed this declaration. And invest in the next generation of secure and energy efficient cloud computing capacities across Europe. So, of course, the Commission is going to accompany and help the member state in this endeavor. We will notably mobilize the Resilience and Recovery Facility, so the funds that will be made available via this RRF, Resilience and Recovery Facility. You may recall that the President of the Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, said that she wanted to have 20% of Next Generation EU, so the 20% of the budget invested in digital. This was later confirmed in the Council conclusion at the beginning of October. So this really paves the way for us to stimulate the investment in those critical technologies that are very important for the resilience of the European economy, and cloud is really a key part of that resilience. So we don't want to do blind investment, so just invest in cloud capacities like this. So there will be a number of prerequisites because we want to make sure that the cloud infrastructure, the cloud services that will be deployed via this program is going to be sustainable and is also in line with other key policies of the EU. So some of it you have heard already because they are very much in line with what Professor Otto has presented in Gaia-X, and we share very much the same objective in that respect. So criteria of cybersecurity, of data protection, of interoperability across the board, of energy efficiency, of data portability, so the capacity of public administration or business users, of course, to seamlessly transfer their workloads or data from one cloud provider to the other should gradually become a no-brainer. And that should be part of the criteria that we want to impose at an early stage in the construction of these new cloud capacities in Europe. The way the Commission is going to shape this up is via a European Industrial Data and Cloud Alliance. So this will be a gathering of key industrial players in Europe, both on the infrastructure side and on the software side. So we really want to address the entire cloud stack. And we will also invite member states, so specifically individual public administration, individual ministries, to get on board of this alliance to accompany the coordination, the preparation of the roadmap and the investment plans that are required to develop these new European cloud capacities. So this will be very different than what you can find out there today on the market, which is very much based on concentrated infrastructure. In that case, we're aiming very much at something that is very distributed across the entirety of the European Union, that will be very interconnected, so that's why we talk about a federation of capacities, and that will give the users the possibility to assemble different capacities depending on their needs. So let's say public administration is fostering a cooperation with a few other member states on a particular public policy issue. They will be able to get access to different cloud infrastructure, different data services that they can assemble very rapidly for the purpose of putting forward that new service. So you can see that we have a lot of challenge in front of us. The Commission is really putting its words to work. So via the recovery package, via also Digital Europe program, Connecting Europe facility to program to finance the interconnection between different member states, we believe that we will be able to achieve this European federation of cloud capacities that will be for the benefit of European public administration as well as European businesses. So we really see a very broad potential user base for this European Cloud Federation. So many thanks and looking forward to your questions.
Thank you so much, Pierre. And here, so you mentioned how you're looking at pilots to share infrastructure among member states. And this is a titanic job, because we were looking at some point how some regions, in my case, I was looking at some Italian regions trying to do the same exercise at the local level. And this is actually an incredibly difficult task ahead. So it's, as you said, it may look trivial, but it's actually a very, very substantial effort to manage to pull this off. And maybe the other point that hopefully we'll be able to touch upon again, really, as you say, cost should actually drive down if the infrastructure will actually be shared by several administrations, be it at local or central level. So thank you for walking us also through the financing, so people now know this is real and there is funding attached to it and earmarked. We will now move on to industry, and actually I would like to welcome in the broadcasting studio Cedric from Orange Cloud Business. And actually, as we know, obviously Orange was a day one member of the Gaia-X Foundation. And since you obviously, Cedric, are the Deputy CEO of the Orange Cloud Business, so there is no better person that can explain why did Orange actually see the benefits of such a decentralized cloud model. The floor is yours.
Yeah, good morning. Can you hear me? Yeah, perfectly. So good morning, everybody. And first, I hope that you are all in good shape and that you and your beloved are in good health. So I don't want, and to answer to your question and to your point, I don't want to state the obvious, but I think that it's probably the first time, and sorry, it's not the first time that you have heard these type of things during a conference and a roundtable, but I think that I do believe that we are really at a tipping point in terms of technology as impacting the geopolitical aspects and the state sovereignty. And I think that is the first time that it has impacted that much. To underline it and to prove that point, I think the first one is that we are all seeing today a drastic fragmentation of the technological ecosystem, what I'm used to call the geoternets. It's that the borders becoming stronger and stronger between the US IT digital ecosystem, the Chinese ecosystem, the Russian ecosystem, and as well the European ecosystem. And I would say that it's not any longer that IT and digital is a center of cost for the enterprise. This is now a vital and central subject in a trade war and sovereignty, for instance. The second point, which is very obvious and very important and we'll come to the Gaia-X and the reason why Orange has decided to be part from D1 of this very great and I would say tremendous initiative, is that I think that we are seeing today an extraordinary convergence of technological shifts. And that is more, by the way, in the B2B space than in the B2C space. I can mention a few things like the 5G, the AI, artificial intelligence, or the edge computing, which will be for sure the next big things when it comes to the cloud. So coming back to the questions, having said that, I think that to answer why Gaia-X and why Orange was proud and very honored to be a founding member and day one member of Gaia-X, I think it stands to the sense. You know, Orange is a network native digital services company, and as a leader in the connectivity, cybersecurity, and cloud services in Europe, we are really striving for excellence in supporting our customers, partners, public sectors, administrations, private customers as well in their digital transformation. But yet, I would say that it's very dear to our heart and part of our DNA and part of, I would say, Gaia-X DNA to do it in a European way by protecting the data, by protecting interoperability as well. That's the reason why open source is so important, and by protecting, I would say, the sovereignty of the data that we are producing. And that's the reason why Orange was so proud and honored to participate to this great initiative. Having said that, I don't want to be naive or I would say devoutly optimistic. What are the competitive advantage in Europe in that space? The game is not over, and especially when it comes to the B2B space. The first thing is, I would say that we don't have to underestimate our strength as European. You know, when it comes to digital, and especially as mentioned by my peers and colleagues and friends previously, you know, when it comes to digital and especially from artificial intelligence, cloud, cybersecurity, the questions of skill is very crucial. When I discuss with companies, when I discuss with public sectors, and sometimes as well in the parts, when I discuss in I would say M&A discussion about what are the key blockers for some companies to extend and to grow faster, the skills were at the centers of, I would say, preoccupation of the different actors. And the good news, and it comes from, and I will refer to a study and a survey that has been made by McKinsey, there are 30% more developers in Europe than in the US. So coming back to the skills are a key driver of the transformation, I think that we don't have to underestimate our strength as European in this one. The second part is, I think it's an important one. We need to take to have some lessons from the past. And many sovereign cloud, you know, projects in different countries, not only in Europe, have failed in the past due to their addressable market size. And I think that in the past it was too much isolated in terms of market segment, in terms of workloads as well, and application that will be, you know, at the centers, the sweet spot of those initiatives. And what is really important and really good, I would say, in Gaia-X is that it's taking Europe as an overall market. It has started with the German and French initiative, and now it will expand. And it's really important that it's for the public sectors, but also as well for the businesses. And we are working with key and vital company for European economy, or is really looking at protecting the intellectual property. And I think that having this size of our market is very important. The third one is that we have at the European Commission level, we have European commissioners, like Thierry Breton, for instance, who are really pushing hard and really, you know, taking, you know, into consideration these problems of data sovereignty, of cloud sovereignty, of end-to-end, of data spaces, which is important as well. And I think that is very important to have the support for the different states, but as well from the European Commission. The last one, in terms of key advantages as European players, I would say that Europe is a key territory where industrial high quality data have been produced. And by creating, I would say, a European data space built with data sovereignty and transparency at its core, I think that we are building together a solid ground for trust across Europe between service providers and customer who produce and consuming those data. Now, and last, what are the key success factors? I think that one point which is very crucial for the success of this initiative, and thank you again to the German and French government for having this initiative of creating Gaia-X, and European Commission to strongly support the initiative. I think that we don't have to make a trade-off by creating this, a trade-off between, I would say, sovereignty and innovation. We don't have to make a choice to say that it's rather sovereignty than, I would say, innovation. You know, the customers, business customers, but not only business customer, and administration wanting to deliver new services to the citizen are looking at new services, innovation, customer experience by respecting the data sovereignty, by avoiding to compromising the data. So it's really looking at innovation, and especially when it comes to competitiveness of the European players, we need to bring innovation by respecting the way that Europe wants to do it, by respecting the data sovereignty. And I think that it's part also of the great initiative of Gaia-X, that from D1, they have involved providers like us, they have involved state, but as well users, end users, which I think innovation will, always come from the end users. At the end of the day, we can think, I have a marketing team within my organization, but what I said every time is that listening to the business users, the end users, is the innovation coming from, it's open of innovation and coming from the end users. So it was really an important point from the Gaia-X initiatives. An important point as well is that we need to embed from day one, I would say, the diversity of the different data space, the providers, the users. And as well, I think that countries sometimes or providers involve members of non-Europe. I think that Europe has not to work in isolation. We need to do it and to fix guidance, to think guidelines to the providers and suppliers who want to work with European players. But we don't have to work for isolation, as we want to still have competitiveness for the European players, and also to think that Europe has a strong impact in the world, is selling products, have customer outside of Europe. So it's really important to work either as open and not in isolation. Handing over to you for the question now.
Thank you so much, Cedric. Another really rich intervention, and thank you for having touched upon the relationship between sovereignty and innovation. So we heard in the previous section of keynotes how and whether and how digital sovereignty and global interdependencies can coexist. And obviously, we now hear from you that also innovation can actually go hand in hand with digital sovereignty. And really important, as you stressed, that obviously Europe cannot work in isolation of the rest of the world. So really clear sense of direction. Thank you for sharing with us the orange perspective. And now I'll give the floor to our last speaker of this section, Ralph Schirmeisen, who has been very active working on architectures in Gaia-X in Germany, and can walk us through the benefits for public sector and what's the overall perspective and how the project has developed out of Germany from a provider side. Ralph, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Irena. Thank you for this great stage here. It is really essential to share knowledge in this round. First, let me talk about what HP is doing so far for Gaia-X. We are working on Gaia-X since the beginning of this year. HP could bring a lot of experience from the Cloud 28 Plus EU project. Maybe you can remember that we contributed our knowledge to a couple of Gaia-X work streams, and we're also writing some pages on the first technical architecture document, which Boris Otto just mentioned before. And now we will be the day one member on the Gaia-X Foundation. I think the 18th and 19th of November will be the big dates for the announcement of this foundation. I see a huge involvement in Gaia-X of many companies, but also from the public sector, for example, healthcare. So there's a real need for easy access to modern technology and to work with data. But at the moment, it is still too complicated, and the lack of knowledge is also an obstacle. With Gaia-X, I see we can overcome these challenges. We will have less interoperability issues. We will see federated trust relationships between the public sector and private companies. Just think about smart cities. The main difficulty here is to build up a deep technical knowledge about smart city use cases and to run them later on. And in addition, it is important to bring all these different data silos together. So what is happening now? Every city has its own knowledge, has its own smart data platform, and has on top of that a data consolidation project. But what about the smart region or smaller cities? How do they participate? With a fully decentralized approach, every region or city can develop local use cases on its own and can also be part, maybe, on a trans-regional mobility platform, which is a central approach, not really easy to establish. Now you can have an easy access via federated cloud nodes, a trusted relationship, and a built-in data sovereignty with Gaia-X. Here is a moment where HPE can deliver value. We are focusing a lot on the trusted chain. How can we ensure that no infrastructure or data set is compromised in their own data center or even on the way to the next Gaia-X instance? This is one of the main topics for our customers. HPE calls it the Zero Trust framework. Not only does Zero Trust help improve security, but more important, Zero Trust makes security agile and elastic and will scale on cloud networks like a decentralized Gaia-X network. We will bring this value add to the meshed cloud networks. In the context of ease of use, we want to make the use of many Gaia-X instances or nodes as easy as possible. The cloud feeling must come on premise and on the edge. We are working on fully managed Gaia-X cloud farms. In order to make the use of Gaia-X easy, it is absolutely necessary that at least the Gaia-X stack plus the infrastructure runs on its own. You will see Gaia-X as a service solutions for on-premise from us for sure. Or we are the #1 provider for HPE solutions worldwide. We see a Gaia-X secured research network in the EU so that institutions and researchers can easily connect to this network. We have seen a huge demand during this pandemic. Researchers were asking for resources. HPE can deliver this as a service, but we do not have the trusted researcher network right now. On the other side, we are also looking on the data. At the moment, it is still difficult to measure the real value of the own data. And as a result of that, how can I sell and buy data? How it is possible to monetize data? We already built a data monetization platform where we encapsulated data to a blockchain in order to sell and buy on a trusted relationship. Here, I think the public authorities have to do some more work. It is allowed for cities, for example, to sell data to earn additional money. It's pretty unclear at the moment, I think. The techniques are ready to run. We can build up a data-centric architecture for our customers. We can work on a joint data value index, and we can help to monetize these data. I have another interesting thing. From next year on, HPE announced the new HPE Trusted Supply Chain. We will deliver the highest level of security for public sector customers that prefer EU-sourced products with a verifiable cyber assurance. We plan to build servers again in Europe with all the EU regulations you need for a trusted build process. So what I like very much is the topic of sustainability for digital projects. HPE already can deliver every project in the context of circular economy. We can take care of technology after 3 or 5 years lifetime. We bring these products to a second life. We bring single assets and ingredients back to the production cycle. We also can deliver a certificate about the then safe carbon footprint. I think we should integrate more sustainability topics to the federated European clouds. So, last but not least, you asked me how can HPE help SMEs and the public sector for Gaia-X? I see Gaia-X always as a project at customer side. It is a question of use case and how the individual solution looks like. As a day one member, we see all the different use cases that is already implemented. And I believe we can easily leverage from these use cases for our customers. In the most situation, we will have a brownfield approach. So it does make sense to early involve us. It could be important to have an eye on the data structure. It could be important to have an eye on the connectivity, or even at the organizational structure before connecting to Gaia-X. Okay, Irena, thank you so far.
Thank you so much, Ralph. And here, trust, again, emerging as a critical element of the whole ecosystem. And obviously, you also highlighted, Ralph, sustainability, mentioned also previously by the Commission. We unfortunately didn't have the chance yet to dig deeper into that aspect of the story, but it is true that it should not be left out, because obviously it is a core element of the European data strategy and overall vision across sectors. So we have just a few minutes now for questions. And as I said before, I was given the very ungrateful task to make a trade-off between giving the floor to our fabulous speakers and collecting questions. So I would just maybe ask everyone that is watching us today to understand that this is meant to be a conversation starter, really thought-provoking, and then we would really encourage you to, to reach out and continue the conversation offline. This being said, I would like to maybe raise two questions that we have received so far. The first one, what are really the challenges for public sector to really gain benefits out of this decentralized model? And secondly, there was one specific question. So we talked about, and many speakers touched upon actually open source as the power of many to be really kind of the key underlying driver. And we received one question that is asking specifically, Dr. Otto, what will be the role in the Gaia-X Foundation of proprietary software? So I leave for now these two questions, and then we'll wrap up the session.
Yeah, perhaps if I may, I can start, because one question addresses also my little keynote particularly. So when I start with the open source question, look, in the end, it's about, let's say, making sure that in the data economy in Europe, both providers and consumers of services, cloud-based services, adhere to, let's say, our European values for the use and management of data. So therefore, what Gaia-X is about basically is trying to take these values and translate them into technical specifications and open standards. Saying that, also I'd like to stress that basically it is open for every service, cloud-based service provider, to adhere to these standards and pass a test. So, and that is really relatively independent on, let's say, this service is based on a proprietary software license model or an open source software model. So basically, providers of Gaia-X compliant services can choose according to their free will. What we envisage, though, is, let's say, that these federated services that form the glue between the cloud service ecosystem partners, we will make sure that they will be available as open source as well, because, as said, we believe in the fact that this is, let's say, a trust anchor in itself and basically allows us to work on that as a community. Perhaps regarding the other questions with regard to challenges, I think it was mentioned also in one of the previous speakers. I think we need to overcome, let's say, or we need to improve in terms of data readiness. I mean, if you want to be part in a data ecosystem and sharing data, you have to make sure that you have done your housekeeping in the past and your homework, right? And if we look into, let's say, both the industrial but also the public sector, I believe there is much to be done in order to be able to participate easily in a data ecosystem. And the other thing is, let's say, interoperability. Remember, I mentioned this shared digital twin thing, or sometimes referred digital thread. We need to agree on unambiguous understanding of how, let's say, we, in terms of information and data objects representing real-world objects. That is something where we have to work together, and this can only be achieved together. That is important. So data readiness and interoperability are the two, let's say, from a technical point of view, the challenges I see for public service providers, public service organizations.
Great, and thank you so much, Dr. Otto. And Mario, did you also want to comment on open source and generally the trust question?
Well, very much first in line with the previous intervention for public sector. There is a question that we have seen also about the quality of the data that is very important. So you know, you don't get quality out of the data analytics if the data is not of good quality itself. But it's also very important that we may have different ways of handling data. Sometimes we need to use quick and dirty analysis to just identify trends. We may not need the full-fledged data that will make sure that we can take that definite decisions, because with the speed of movement of policies and the economy in general, sometimes is just as good as having just a trend and understanding this. And this is very amazing, because it does defocus a bit the problem from the data that of high quality provided by the traditional data sources in the member states or in Europe, to probably acquire data that comes from different sources, from public and private sector. And what is a better indication of our movement of goods in Europe, if not what arrives in the port of Rotterdam or in another port? So this is the power of bringing actually data from the different sources. I saw also a very important question on the trust, and I want to refer again, that is very important from the public sector, that we renew this trust with the citizens and the business. But my last point would like to be on the interoperability that the colleagues in Gaia-X so much make the focus. The semantics of this aspect is very fundamental for the public sector. There was also questions about how much in terms of the understanding of each other's notions and data amongst the different administrations. That's a lot of work to be done, and that's very, very fundamental. And a last note on open source, because the Commission just announced 1 week ago the open source strategy that we are going to engage, and this is a renewing of our open source strategy. More than speaking about it, what I want to say is that it is not anymore sufficient to understand the aspects of interoperability by defining standards, common standards to be followed. It's important that we provide solutions to the public administrations. And as we are doing with the CEF building blocks or the EYES work, where we provide building blocks that the public administrations can use and reuse again to build their own services, and this is obviously extendable to the private sector. It's very important that under Gaia-X or any other initiatives that are blossoming now in Europe, we combine this aspect of standards with early adopters and early pilots. It's very important that we provide the means for people to see, as Dr. Otto said, the benefits that this brings to the particular customer. Thank you.
Great, Mario. And indeed, again, we really need to start from the consumer needs for the public administration needs. So, and this has been equally a repeated theme of this morning. And thank you also for specifically highlighting how concrete use cases, showcasing solutions are absolutely critical for the success of the project. So really in the very last minutes we have, any further comments from any other panelists on the challenges for public sector to reap off the benefits of this decentralized cloud network?
Yes, if I can intervene, Irena. Yes,
sure.
Thanks, and also in continuation of what Mario has just been presenting, which is totally in line with what we're trying to work actually hand in hand. We one of our key objectives is to scale up the successful experience of the Commission across the Union. And for that purpose, we want to do some sort of a toolbox for the member states for public administration that will include the common European standards and the requirement for the public procurement of data processing services. Very often, you have to imagine there is a public procurer that probably doesn't know that much about cloud that will have to draft the tender specs. Why do we need to reinvent the wheel in every single national administration at national, regional, local level? I mean, we should agree on common specification at European level and then provide this as a common toolbox for the member state. The second aspect to facilitate this will be through the development of European marketplace for cloud services. This is something we have committed in the data strategy, and that will provide for national, regional, local procurer of IT services a single point of entry for them to procure those solutions that are validated at European level. So it will provide them with the guarantees that what they buy on this marketplace actually fulfills the European requirements in terms of data protection, cybersecurity, environmental requirements. So that those sort of marketplaces that we start seeing proliferating in different member states, we really think it makes sense to bring this at European level to avoid fragmentation in the procurement processes.
Great, and thank you for referring to the toolbox as well, because as you say, it will be obviously helpful guidance and to avoid the reinventing the wheel many times and hopefully overcome fragmentation. Really to close off, Cedric and Ralph, do you have any very final comments on any aspects on your end to close off the session?
Yeah, yes, oh, please, go ahead.
Just in 2 or 3 words, for me, the biggest challenge at the moment is when I look from the user side is that someone needs to write a detailed instruction whether or not or how someone is allowed from the public sector organizations to use the new EU Cloud Federation, so that this person has a full legal support for that. Something like a clear statement is missing at the moment. I see too much room for interpretations. So this is one step from me.
Thank you, Ralph. And we can certainly discuss, I think, offline, Pierre, on that one. And Cedric.
Yeah, short and sweet, since we are running late. I would say that very quickly, I think that it's important to not being binary in the choice that we have to make. There is not only, sovereign or not sovereign. I think that there are a continuum of different solutions, and I think that is being raised when we talk about multi-cloud, hybridization, working with private, working with public cloud, and so on. I think it's very important and focusing on the different usage verticals, and I would say importance and security that we have to ensure to the data to have, I would say, a continuum of solution with the things which needs to be very protected, very sovereign oriented, and the other ones which will be less sensitive. And especially in questions of competitiveness and being open and not working in isolation, I think it's an important point. And it has been raised by my colleague just previously.
Fantastic. So with that, I would like to really warmly thank all of you. You've done a fantastic job to shed light and provide greater insights from a provider, user, overall picture and vision perspective. Thank you so much. And I'm sure that, the community with us today will reach out to further continue the conversation offline. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Right. Bye-bye.
And take care.